Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. We're going to be talking today about jumping past the now and moving into the post-COVID age, and having a look at some of the issues that are surrounding that, and some of the things we might be seeing in the near future. So, just click on over, and as usual, you have me, Chris Lukianenko, host of the Intelligent Workplace podcast. And with me today is Julian Cross, Digital Services Partner at Telstra. So Julian is very passionate about transformation, challenge and growth, and thrilled by the intersect of technology, people and social structures. He has a lot of experience in working with some of Australia's largest and most trusted brands, providing applications and solutions that enrich and enhance customer engagement and transform existing business processes. So I'm going to say he's pretty well qualified for sharing his insights on today's topic. So welcome aboard, Julian.
Thank you, Chris. Really excited to be with you today.
Great to have you here, mate. As usual, the About Us, this is LiveTiles. If you're a returning participant to these sessions, you may have seen this before. So we're a global company specializing in employee collaboration and communication software services and AI for the workplace. And we are littered around the world, currently working from home still. So the agenda today. So we're going to have a look at what is the new normal, new thinking and new workplace behaviours. We'll take a look at some of the key drivers around the return to the office. Julian will share his thoughts on what we may see in the future, and then we'll take a bit of a look at key opportunities in technology. So we'll get into it. So let's turn our attention to the new normal and what that might look like. Our CEO, Carl Reinventing, has referred to the new normal as this new period as business unusual. Julian, what are your thoughts on what this new normal might look like, mate?
So, Chris, I think it definitely the term new normal is a good one, because there is no doubt that as we transition both during the current COVID event, and that could last for quite a long time, but we are going to see a total change to the way in which businesses based all of the assumptions of their ways of working for their staff and their ways of interacting with other businesses. This is, I think, one of those tipping points where an external force has driven businesses to throw everything up in the air, and things are going to come down in different places. So the key message, I think, is we cannot see the current time under COVID restrictions, semi-lockdown, and as we slowly come out, as being a discrete period of time, and then everything goes back to the way we used to be. There is not a shadow of a doubt that will not be what we are looking at. We are going to be initiating changes to business process and business operation now that last into the future.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I often hear people saying, oh, when we get back to normal, when we get back to the office, that sort of thing. And people, they say that, and I'm like, I'm not sure if it's going to quite be what you think it is going to be, because things have significantly changed in the world.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is a confluence of two perspectives and two aspects that exist within social systems, and businesses, as we know, are social systems. They're governed by structures and rules that we put in place, that the business puts in place, and then there are the staff, the agents, the people who interact with those structures. And what we see in transformation is usually only one of those aspects coming to the fore and trying to drive a change. You see a business change structures. I think of someone like ANZ Bank, or indeed Telstra, where I work, who have gone to an agile approach. Large scale, very large corporates, and ANZ Bank in particular, they made a structural change. The decision came down from the top, and the entire business revolutionized because the structures that determined how people behave were changed. That's a structural change. Then you can see other activities which are driven by the people. They're a lot harder to find as examples of that in business. To see key changes driven by the people, you tend to look at social systems, and you look at things like, you know, the Arab Spring and things like that, where people decided to act differently. Well, what we've got here, and what I think is really interesting, and why I really believe this is going to be substantive in terms of its long-term impact, and going to create this concept of whatever a new normal is you have both occurring. You have businesses understanding they need to change their business practice, their business operations in order to stay successful and in order to stay relevant. And you have people wanting to change their behaviours. The figures are quite interesting. For a number of businesses, the numbers are coming in somewhere around 60% plus or minus, depending upon the business, of people, staff who are responding that they are concerned or highly concerned about going back to workplace. That is a large proportion of a corporate office who are expressing concern about going back into the office. Yet, what do we often hear in conversations on Zoom meetings? Oh, I can't wait to get out of the house and get back and see some people. So there's a little bit of a conflict there, but clearly there is an underlying change in behaviours that we expect.
It feels like that traditional 9 to 5 cubicle, you know, physical office space location type of thing is just not going to happen. What is the model going to look like? You know, you're trying to balance that 60% of people that maybe don't want to go back in, and you've got businesses not wanting to spend money on physical office locations. I'm confused as to what the best method moving forward is. What are your thoughts?
Chris, I'm not sure that we know yet. Okay, so you mentioned cubicles. So first and foremost, sooner or later, there will be businesses going back to having physical cubicles, because we all went to an lovely open plan working space, which suited many people but didn't suit others. Businesses have gone to a hot desking model, where we had people who you could use any desk because you wanted to change the dynamic and you didn't want to have these private areas. So clearly hot desking can't work. We will need a piece of tech. Businesses are going to need a piece of technology that allows me to book a desk. And quite possibly I will have to be at that desk. I will have to nominate the times that I'll be at that desk, and quite possibly there may be, at least in the initial term, as we get back during this period when social distancing still applies, there may be some restrictions. There was some very interesting testing and projections made on some of the very, very large tower blocks in the city, where there obviously are thousands of workers. In order to maintain social distancing guidelines as people enter the buildings, the calculations on a 30+ story tower block is it takes somewhere between 3 and 4 hours just to get the staff in. Now,
yeah, absolutely. I know in our office block is only 5 levels. We're a small office block where we are in Hobart, but you're only allowed to have one person in the lift at a time.
That's right.
You extrapolate that out for the huge buildings you have in the major cities, and that is going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, it's just not possible. I'm probably stepping out of business. I mean, I'm concerned about impact on environment. If people choose not to take public transport, then the implications are either they are going to work at home or they're going to get in their car. But again, there's been a piece of analysis done by a transport consultancy that if the 800,000 workers who work in Sydney CBD, if they followed the guidelines on public transport and put everyone else in a car, you would need a car park 3 square kilometres in area, and that is larger than the Sydney CBD. So,
oh my goodness.
We need to find a new way. We need to find a new way quickly. And I think some of the businesses that are thinking they can just go back to work are going to get quite a rude shock. There is going to be a need to maintain a large proportion of staff working remotely long term.
Do you find it slightly exhilarating thinking about the new ways to work and the possibilities it could lead to? I feel like
Yes,
you do.
Yeah, I do. And interestingly, I've spent a lot of time working on mobility projects, so device-based, mobile device-based technology. And I've got to say, I've been asking myself, and this is a really interesting question, because I can see both arguments. But I personally, I'm just using myself as an example. Since COVID lockdown, I have not accessed my corporate services on my device. Because at home, I've just flipped open my laptop and popped into the office, and it's all there, and then gone back out and done a few other things, gone back in. And because I was accessing my corporate services on my iPhone between meetings, in cafes, during meeting, et cetera, et cetera. And while commuting, and now that's not something that I'm participating. So already my behavior change has driven a change in my use of technology. What is that going to mean for the way in which businesses serve up their content? We've seen a massive issue around security, and I think that's been probably one of the greatest underlying concerns. I think businesses, the sort of what you saw was the need to communicate. Okay, the need to rapidly deploy teams, the need to rapidly have a content sharing, et cetera, et cetera. The issues that sat behind that were twofold, and predominantly based around security and access. The current uplift in data usage, that of course, you've got insights to working in a business like Telstra, is phenomenal. And I've got to tell you, globally, the internet, proverbial thing called the internet, is under a lot of pressure because of that.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the key drivers for businesses returning to the office. Things like employee health, safety, and well-being. They're all very important considerations, aren't they?
Yes, they are. I think I see three key drivers. And two are based around the individual, and one around the business and the business outcome. And from the individual, I think first and foremost, and I probably put this as first, is confidence. And I think that speaks to that 60% of people who are concerned. If staff don't have confidence that when they go back to the office, their employer will be taking all reasonable steps to ensure that they are not exposed to a potential infection, then we are not going to find people willing to go back into work, or when they go back to work, they are going to be not in a good state of mind. So employee confidence is really, really fundamental. And then, of course, there is the issue of our work health and safety obligations. We need to provide safe places of work. We know that businesses, probably got away with cleaning once every few days, once a week. And, let's face it, we saw that, okay? Yeah. And we as the employees sort of, oh, well, that's got whipped, quick vacuum and a quick wipe around, and that was it. So clearly that's going to see a change. I know that some of the government departments that have had to keep operating, great irony in this process is that a lot of federal government departments couldn't even follow their own guidelines on work from home. But they have instituted some really interesting physical hacks, I call them, because that's all they are. They're hacks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Rubbish bin outside the door of the bathroom. So when you leave the main door of the bath, and there's a box of tissues, so you take a tissue and you open the door holding the tissue in your hand on the handle, and then you put it in the bin in the corridor outside. That's how they've been trained to operate. Yeah. Contactless taps, things like that. So these are physical space implications that businesses right now are looking at. I know Telstra is investing a huge amount of time in how do we make properties safe. And clearly there's technology that can enable that around cameras, that body sensing, temperature, potentially around using information about who's on each floor and when they're arriving. So that whole notion of having to book book your desk, etc., etc. And then you've got to look at all the pieces of the puzzle. But I know a number of the banks and the large enterprises are already talking about needing to get 20 to 30% of their staff back in the office over the next 3 or 4 weeks. So they are faced with this right now.
Have you heard of the example of Team A and Team B in the office?
Yeah, quite a lot. Not so much in corporate. That is being used in manufacturing. And it was straight away implementing it in most of the manufacturing and the logistics space. One of the businesses I know went to the point at the start of shift, everyone was responsible for a clean, and at the end of shift, everyone individually was responsible for a clean, and the entire Team A had to clear the car park before anyone from Team B could even drive into the car park. So they had a full physical separation and like a 10 or 15 minute changeover time where all the machines had to basically be tooled down, and that way they were achieving for their own risk mitigation, which of course is that third point when we start talking about how does the business mitigate its own risk.
Yeah.
Because we've seen a reputational risk, the Meatworks, Cedar Meats, that's a significant reputational risk to that business as a result. But we also have to think about the impact of a cluster of infections and what that might have on a team, on the IT team in a large corporate, or the risk management team, or the C-suite, where all of a sudden, if we did get an infection, what that's going to mean. So there clearly needs to be some very strong thinking, and we're thinking about moving forward to a post-COVID era. There was an advert, Chris, in the pre-COVID era that was talked about soldiering on when you have the flu. You take the pill and you soldier on. I won't mention the brand.
I remember that.
Never again.
Yes.
So again, a behavioural change. We cannot accept in Australia that when you're sick, it's okay to turn up to work. We cannot accept that moving forward. We have to change the way that businesses expect behaviours from staff, and that individuals take responsibility for others. Because I think what ended up happening was we wanted to seem like we were giving our all for the business, but in doing so, we are creating a risk. We can't have that.
I think that's a bit of a generational thing. I work with a lot of younger people in my office, and I'm from that generation that if you were sick, you just turn up to work no matter what. And then I've still carried on with that behaviour in a younger workforce, and they're like, get out, go away.
Can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. No. It's funny, we're talking about the risks to the companies and that sort of thing. And so for a company like LiveTiles, so we operate on the share market. So I would imagine that if, say, we got caught up in a cluster situation like those Meatworks, that could potentially also have a financial ramification for us with our share price.
Significant. And I think we're going to start seeing savvy CEOs and boards actually reporting to, formally reporting, a bit like what's happened with formally reporting on our environmental credentials and that sort of thing, but formally reporting on, infection control, risk mitigation, etc. Factors that sit around the risk of pandemic transmission.
Yeah. Let's turn it quickly to mental health. Do you think that we may have underestimated the toll that this last 3 months or so has taken on people's mental health?
I think there's been a massive amount of uncertainty and stress. Whenever you've got that in any part of your life, in your work life, in your family life, then we are going to see an enhanced stress, and that leads, we know, to impaired mental health outcomes. When you add to that the stress of the pandemic and potentially older parents or relatives or vulnerable family members in high-risk areas, yes, we've got a lot of potential to see adverse impacts. And maybe working from home mitigated for some people, maybe working from home increased and manifested that more dramatically, because, you know, I certainly, you know, I'm a bit of an extrovert and I love being around people and I get energy off people.
Same. Yeah.
But, you know, by the same token, I've been able to, and I, you know, being in the type of transformational consulting role with businesses that I'm in, I thought it was, initially, I thought it was the end of the world. I can't get on a whiteboard. I almost had a panic attack. Put me near a whiteboard and that's what I need. But we've found ways around that. There's and certainly some of the designers that I work with have found using some fantastic technology that is enables collaboration in a virtual workshop space, which is phenomenal. And I couldn't participate in a couple of really exciting design workshops, and I cannot believe how the designers, hats off to them, and the facilitators created an energetic workshop space when everyone's sitting in lounge rooms and offices. So we are seeing dramatic changes.
We've got a question here from Laura, who's made a great point, actually, throwing in the whole homeschooling thing and how that has also, you know, trying to homeschool and work and how that's added to increased stress and pressure.
If we as professionals had not had that as well, this was a seamless change. Adding in having to have you know, care for school-age kids and the stress of trying to keep them learning and motivated was I think may well have been the point where people will look back on this and say, no, that was a really bad time. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Now, moving forward, when kids go back to school and that pressure is relieved, I think what we're actually then going to see is people being able to go, oh, you know, that weight's been lifted off my shoulders. Yeah. And working from home really does make sense because I'm here when they come home at 3:30.
Yeah.
Okay. And honestly, that is a privilege. I don't have to rush out the door at 6:30 or 7 for my commute. That's when I think people start saying, you know what? As long as I don't have to do the homeschooling crap, you know, they can go to school for that.
Yeah.
This is a really, really good option. So, Chris, the average in Telstra went really early, you know, 5 years ago, to a highly flexible workplace, future ways of working. And prior to COVID happening, the figures were around, on average, staff spent 2.4 days a week working from home in Telstra Enterprise.
Yep.
So half the working week was already being spent by most staff working from home. And I personally did too, at 1 or 2 days. And I worked across 2 offices, et cetera, et cetera. Now, moving forward, I think that's going to be even more so. Other than the occasional need to make a face-to-face appearance with one of my customers and maybe heading into the office to keep connected with people once a week, I can't see the need for me to go back to the city. What does that mean for our cityscapes? What does that mean for the tower blocks and for all of the businesses which are built around the 800,000 workers, not the 200,000, occasional video shoppers and tourists, et cetera, but the 800-odd thousand employees who work in the CBD. What does moving, potentially 90% of them on any given day will be at home.
Yeah, maybe we need to organise regular pub lunches. We meet at the pub every other day.
We're talking about the new normal.
Yeah.
If Melbourne City Council, Sydney, Hobart City Council are not already thinking about that, then they're going to be caught short.
Yeah, I joke, but it is, yeah, definitely a serious consideration. Serious. Let's move to my slide's going to work. There we go. What may we see? We've covered a little bit of this here, but something else that's sort of in the future is this whole idea if people aren't in the office and not requiring office, there's going to be a lot of spare office space for rent.
Yeah.
If people are reducing the size of their physical footprint, isn't there?
And that's going to be something that businesses will do very, very rapidly. There's no point in having the overhead if you don't have the staff utilisation. So we're going to see changes to that sort of thing. I think some of the businesses that offer, I won't use any brand names, but
shared
multiple
office spaces.
Individuals, small shared office spaces are going to find a challenge.
I do find that is going to be a real challenge for people where you've got a lot of people in small offices already, and then you multiply that across a floor where you might have 10 businesses on a floor, and you've got shared arrangements with their co areas, that sort of thing. It just doesn't feel like it's going to work in this socially distant world.
No, I think where businesses have the control themselves, referencing back to that notion of structure, and businesses can implement business rules for their own staff, then we're going to see changes. Where you've got a mishmash and lots of businesses all sharing the same space, I think that's going to be challenging. But I'm sure those businesses that provide those spaces are already thinking about that. They may need to implement, some sort of more guidelines or rules, et cetera, and that's what we're going to see. We're going to see technology change. We've been in a transition stage, so my view is this is the people in work in technology like ourselves, Chris. We've been, how to put this and not sound really bad. This is the event we've been waiting for, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
That sounds absolutely terrible.
No, it's not. It's just the fact that when a big thing like this happens, it gives birth to change and new ideas and that sort of thing. Does that sound better?
It does. Thank you for rephrasing in a much more politically correct. What we've seen is cloud native and cloud-based services, and businesses. Do I have to go? Should I go? Maybe I should deploy some mobile, some flexible working technology over here, but I might still keep sweating and holding on to my old Lotus Notes program that someone built in a garage 20 years ago. That does not work in this new situation of remote working. So I think we're going to see a couple of things. I've got my sort of futurist prediction. We will see a lot of work on integration, and we will see a lot of coalescing around a smaller number of product stacks. And by that, I don't mean as only a couple, only Microsoft and a couple. No, what I mean is we won't see so much independence in terms of I'll go and build something over here, or I'll have a little dev team build something there. I think we're going to see a fairly long cycle of cost out. Australia was already in a cost out cycle regarding technology spend, so that is going to extend. And my personal view is you want to be in product at the moment. You want to have a product that has a really strong story and narrative that can stitch together different parts of businesses. So integration becomes really important, and cloud native is going to be given the kick along. That I think that it's sort of been, we've been going through this sort of transition stage, and everyone's been saying, oh, the tipping point's coming. There'll be rapid adoption now, but it hasn't happened for 3 or 4. I've heard that story for 4 years. I think this is the event now that does drive that, and that's going to be very, very interesting.
And something we talked about earlier in the week was development of those solutions, those products, and the potential that there may be some opportunities to onshore the development of those products in using other workshops outside of Australia. Do you think that's going to be a key thing?
Yes, I do. I think there's twofold answer to that. The global supply chain is broken, and just-in-time fulfillment of supply chain is broken. Similarly, I think and we've seen it, there's been a pullback for contact centers and for all of that sort of BPO work to onshore. And I think we will also see a pullback to onshore development work. And I think that there's always been one of those, for me, I've always been passionate about local and onshore development, and so I am biased. You have to take what I'm saying with with a degree of skepticism. But there were always, I believed, far too many risks to offshore a development project in technology and put it beyond your eyesight, over the horizon, and trust that it will get developed in ways that delight you. And I think that was always challenged. I think now that's even more challenged, that model of offshore teams. We just don't know what the impact will be on those offshore locations, and whether or not we're able to get the value for money, which I think is going to be really important. And the other thing is I'm going to see quite a lot, I think, of the need to do a really good UX focused piece of work. That means we need to be onshore. We really do need to be able to influence the development. And I think there's going to be a lot more work at the back end, because one of the key problems that businesses are finding right now, it's not so much in the front end of the application suite that they're deploying to their customers. It's more in terms of the performance at the back end and the security overlays, the VPN, the integration, the middleware layer. That's where most of my customers and most of the large enterprises have been seeing challenges with their software. That's been the major contributing factor to software performance for the customer, for the end user, has been in all of those back-end services. That's been the challenge.
All right, we've talked a little bit about the doom and the gloom and the change, but let's flip it around. Let's put the positive spin on this. And it's not all doom and gloom. There are opportunities that will present themselves out of all of this, aren't there?
Yes, 100%.
Good.
So first and foremost, there's an old adage: don't be in professional services in a recession. It's a bit of a tough one, but that doesn't mean that professional services aren't going to be required. It means that we have to think about reinventing how we term it and what we see it as. So productization, both in terms of the traditional view of what a product is, but also how you can make what was traditionally maybe viewed as being just professional service, how you can actually try and make that be something different, so that the value is increased for the customer. There's going to be a big emphasis on value and return, and CapEx, cash is going to be really thin. So anything that can be operationalized is going to be a real opportunity. I think there's huge opportunities in cyber security and database security and that middleware integration and database optimization. I think that we've got a lot of businesses invested on the front end piece and thought all you had to do was throw it into a database out the backyard, okay? And they've got multiple databases. They've got databases of every shape and color, and they're finding two things. One, they've done an initial lift and shift to the cloud and just replicated what they had in on-prem infrastructure in the cloud, and all of a sudden it's more expensive. So they've done none of the next step in the evolution of their cloud journey, and that is the cloud optimization. And that's huge right now. That is going to be a massive piece.
Agreed.
And anything to do with database optimization, rationalization, et cetera, is going to be absolutely massive, and I think going to be really turbocharged. I think there's going to be a demand for user experience for a long time forward, and better And I think it really is going to drive businesses to change the way that they serve up content and engage with their staff. And that's not just through services, it's through, you know, all of the peripheral aspects in terms of meetings, et cetera, et cetera. We mentioned cloud native, but I think clearly there's also going to be some real opportunities for new technology. And those new technology solutions are probably going to be in things around potentially staff safety and aggregating multiple parts of that, knowing where people are, knowing where, you know, we think of things like be it proximity logging, but also being able to have a complex solution where you might be integrating into cameras and surface to get appropriate surface cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's going to be a big push on business continuity. The BCP has been exposed as being woefully inadequate from all of our large corporates, not because they did a bad job on BCP and they're planning for it, but because they didn't plan for a big enough event. So the Black Swan event planning is now going to become going to get more important, because what we've experienced, although it was utterly predictable, so really isn't classed as a Black Swan, is actually a Black Swan event, because no one did their planning. Everyone planned for, well, what happens if there's an earthquake in this country and it gets wiped out, or what happens if the bushfires in New South Wales wipe out our data centre? Or what happened, you know, so it was compartmentalised. So the BCP planning always had this notion of fold over resiliency. Well, what we've seen is not an impact that's taken out what most businesses did their planning around and were scared about, and that was infrastructure, cloud, storage, those sorts of things. But what we've seen is something which led to an impact on the people. And we didn't do BCP planning on what happens if everyone's got to go home on Monday. And very few businesses made that successfully. You know, I'm proud to have been a part of Telstra, but Telstra, it was seamless. But none of my customers have found that experience, and we were seamless by luck for Telstra rather than specific planning on the event, because we had already enabled all staff to work from home. Yeah, so I think that's the difference.
Yep.
But there you go.
Absolutely. Well, I better start to wrap this thing up, because we're very quickly running out of time. But I'm just going to say, look, as a software development company with an entire workforce remotely working at the moment, there was a lot in that discussion that really resonated with our situation. There is a lot going on in the world of LiveTiles, as you may have heard last week with my chat with our CEO, Carl Redenbach. We've got some exciting news to announce in the new financial year, and we're working on a number of new tools and services like we talked about just a minute ago to help our customers and their employees now and into the future. But just one specific thing I'd just like to quickly mention is this thing called LiveTiles Vibe that we're working on. I think it can really assist business owners at this time, and is completely free. So LiveTiles Vibe is, as you see on the screen, there's an employee check-in tool that is really going to help you with ensuring that you can get a read on how your employees are feeling when you aren't able to see them face to face. It's very difficult when you're working on a webcam like this to really understand how that person on the other end is feeling. It's designed as an in-the-moment check-in tool. But as we talk to more customers about this, we're very quickly realizing it's not only a very much required tool at this time, but it can actually be used for a lot of different purposes. So we're starting to explore those ideas as well. But I just thought I'd mention that because it is free. And if you're interested in having a look at it, you can jump onto the website there and check that out. Julian, thank you very much for your chat today. It's been absolutely fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you over the last couple of weeks as we've planned for this session. It's been brilliant. There's some great insights there, and I'm sure that the people that are here today will really get some benefit out of it. Thank you very much, mate.
I appreciate the opportunity and very much enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
No dramas. So as we turn to next week, I'm going to look further into the issues around returning to work with the Managing Director of the Hassett Group, David Hassett. So the Hassett Group is a boutique executive recruitment firm, and David is he's sure to be providing some valuable and interesting insights in the session. So we're looking at how it might be a competitive advantage for companies to provide an enriching remote workforce experience for employees, and how embracing that remote working model will allow them to find the best person for the job, not the best person who resides in their local area. And we'll be covering off on lots of other topics in and around that. So I think it's going to be a really interesting chat. So join me here same time next week. Once again, Julian, thank you very much for joining me today, mate. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and we'll talk soon. Stay safe, everybody. See you soon.
Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Thanks, mate. Bye.